I'm going to talk to you about creativity and how to handle it with care. I think we all know creative thinkers and the wonderful things they can do. Sometimes there's a few risks involved. This was a big day in San Jose, California. We've been working on the Saratoga Creek Trail for 20 years. The county had done a multi-agency master plan before that. We had done a feasibility study to see what we could build. And we had figured out how we were going to snake a trail through this narrow creek corridor. We had shut down the expressway. We'd blocked a lane of traffic along a major arterial roadway in our community. And this bridge was coming down, and it was going to provide a connection to the neighborhood, a large neighborhood park in an area of the city that really has very few parks. And then the bridge was put in place. And the contractor took a posture something like this. And when a contractor does that, it's not a good sign. What he saw was that the bridge had been placed where it would fit, but that left a gap, which we hadn't anticipated. That curve was to lead to the bridge. So now we had a gaping hole where someone could walk off into the creek channel. And then on the other side, it looked better, it fit, but it only fit because the contractor had very elegantly taken a pickaxe and knocked off some concrete so the structure could fall into place. So it wasn't exactly what we had expected. And we found out later on that the footings for the bridge had been surveyed. The survey was a bit off. So everything was, the term I think is cattywampus. So we, as trail people, we do what we do. We went for a walk. So I went with my public works team, the inspector, the landscape architect, the consultant. We were walking along Saratoga Creek Trail and said, what are we going to do about this? And the normal response we're bureaucrats. It was, well, it wasn't built per plan. You know, the contractor's got to make this right. It's their job to deal with it. And then I'm on the client side. I'm in the Parks and Recreation Department, and I'm taking the phone calls. I'm in front of the community, and I don't want to be in front of the community or take their phone calls. This project was a real challenge. And so I looked at it and thought, well, the bridge is still standing. And, you know, if we stick to the schedule, I won't have to take those calls. And the other thing in California, it may be in your states as well, we can only build in these waterways between June and October. So we were very close to October. We didn't have a lot of time to figure this thing out, or we'd have a full closure and no trail access. So we took a creative approach to looking at this problem. The bridge was standing. It was a matter of determining, was it safe? And we could figure that out. It would be, because the ledgers on the footings could accept the bridge at any point on the structure. Did we have any other options? Well, we could probably proceed, but we needed to do something about that wall and that gap. And so what we came up with was this solution. And this was a win-win for everyone involved. I didn't want the contractor to get away with everything. So what we said to them was, you're going to cover this concrete with real stone, and you're going to build it up so that that gap goes away. And you'll do the whole structure. It came out cheaper for them. They didn't have to move a bridge, adjust walls, or anything like that. We got something that looked more refined, and anyone coming to this site is going to say, they built a pretty nice bridge. They'll never say, I can see there's a flaw here. So this was a big cover-up. And so I'm going to talk to you about how to do other cover-ups. But before I do, let me just say, we weren't about finger-pointing in this situation. We're all members of a team. The contractor has been brought on as a member of our team. And I also think that when we prepare plans, it's often easy to look at a really thick set of plans and an even thicker set of specifications and say, this must be the perfect plan. Everything's been resolved. It took a lot of paper. But it's important to think that there are always other options. And so if you're not giving away the store and you can figure it out in a different way, it's kind of okay to work through the plans and make some adjustments. Just make sure you talk to the engineer, and if you're making structural changes, make sure they stamp the plans as well. So, I'm going to take you out to East San Jose to Penitential Creek. This is a very, very pretty little creek, and it is it's the best actual creek for steelhead trout, which is a threatened species in California. And it's also site of these California sycamore trees, which look like the common sycamore tree found on street, but this is actually the native variety, which is endangered. This trail is great for a number of reasons. It will be 4 miles long, and it has some interesting attractions at either end. It leads you to Alum Rock Park, which is the oldest civic park in the state of California. And if there's other Californians in the room, this is not the case in San Diego. Balboa Park is much newer than Alum Rock Park. It's a beautiful site. It's someplace to see. And then on the other side of the trail, Bay Area Rapid Transit. It's finally arriving in San Jose after 40 years, and it's going to intersect with the Penitential Creek. And the Bay Area Ridge Trail, which is a designation of a system that goes all along the ridges in the Bay Area, has designated the trail as part of that. So this will be the first place where you can take a hike through a transit facility in the Bay Area. Bring your camera. It's going to be great. So Penitential Creek was all figured out over 10 years ago. We had a master plan. We knew exactly what we were going to do. But if you look at the rendering here, the best we could come up with at that time was a 6-foot attached sidewalk. So it really wasn't a trail. But we had a number of very large trees that were in the way and a very dense canopy. And so it was what we thought was the best we could accomplish. About 10 years later, we came into the funding to design and construct this project. And we went back out to the site. And all over again, we fell in love with this place. It was so beautiful. And the moment you walked off of this roadway, you were in California with a few eucalyptus trees. And so we had this great opportunity. We said, we think we can get rid of these eucalyptus trees now, because over the 10 years, the Army Corps had widened the channel to deal with flood protection in the area. And so now we had a site where we can mitigate. So we could remove some trees. All of a sudden, the trail could go through this landscape we wanted for it to travel through. But we ran into another issue. The native California sycamore tree is an endangered species. It hybridizes very easily with the non-native London plain sycamore tree. And the regulatory agency said, you can be there, but you can't do anything to harm these trees. So it was one of those horrible bargains where we said, well, we can be there, but we can't be there. So we needed creativity to figure out this problem. I studied to be a civil engineer, and I focused in transportation. And so I started my career managing traffic jams, causing people to reroute off of highways onto surface streets. And I'd go home every day stressed out because it was really very stressful work, and I was never actually improving the problem. Traffic was always going to get worse. So I would take interior design classes after work. It would just relieve my stress, and I thought I'd make a fortune in this profession. Interior design programs are amazing because they wait until you've done the studies for 3 years to tell you what you can make in the profession. So I stayed as an engineer in my profession. But what I learned was that nothing new has been invented since the Egyptians, and I'll let you ponder that. And I think that's what I think of when I think of gathering ideas. You can always repurpose or be inspired by others. When you want to have a new idea, you don't just run it up the flagpole and hope it flies. And so this is where you're kind of working through a process to make sure it's going to be viable. And the last image, you're looking at this fabric saying, what could he possibly tell us? Well, this was the final exam. I was given this fabric, and I was supposed to make a beautiful modern room with this fabric. I had to think about what my client was asking of me and not what I thought was in good taste. So this is what I've learned, and this is what I brought to the Trail Project. The first idea is to gather. This is one that I really enjoy. I like to travel. I like to photograph. I like to see things. I keep files about the places I've seen, and then I keep the files of things that I've looked at. And so I've got lots of pictures of trails, bridges. I used to have pictures of traffic signal cabinets. They're never for anyone else to see except for me as I start a project, and I tap into this knowledge that I've gathered so I get some ideas on how other people's have resolved it. The other thing I do is I go into the toolkit, all the things that we've done creatively in the past, and see if we can use them again in our current projects. We've developed a super thin thermoplastic reflective striping that uses glass beads found at airports around the country. So this striping lights up with a regular bike light, which is great because we don't light our trails in San Jose generally they're along riparian corridors. I made a big mistake. I took a creative risk that I didn't know I was taking, and I specified a half mile of trail to use recycled base rock, and it was not a good thing. And so I learned, when you test something, test it in a smaller scale. So we've got a formula for really solid gravel shoulders. And then we developed this mileage marker system that treats the trails as actually a street address. So our 911 center, which used to look at a paper map, can now look at our trails and see them conceptually as roadways so they know how to get the fire and police there. Through some refinement and the mayor asking what these things cost, we reduced our price from $1,000 to $2,000. None of this was technology. It was just about a commitment we had to building bollards because we wanted these markers to be more special than they could be. And so you learn things as you go. The other thing is to pull in design details that honor what you're trying to do in your network. In San Jose, we have a strong mission to make our trails have a sense of place. So all our trails have what's called a gateway. So if you're at the airport, you've got a place to sit and watch the planes take off. The closest you can see an international flight take off in the country is here on the Guadalupe River Trail. Further down on the trail, you'll find a 9.5-ton mammoth sculpture because we found mammoth fossils and we had a large budget for public art, so of course that's what you would do. And Three Creeks Trail, which I can now say is an award-winning trail, thank you American Trails International Trail Symposium, is recalling the cannery history of San Jose. So that had to go into this Penitential Creek project as well. The next stage is to develop your ideas. And now on this project, we of course went to the engineers and the architects and we said, we've got this interesting challenge. We can get rid of some trees, but we have to protect the native California sycamore and we can't do any harm to it. So they thought about it for a while, but the idea came from someone we didn't expect. They were consulting with the regulatory agencies, and one of the regulators said, you know, if you can somehow span over these roots, I don't want them to be touched. If you can span over the root system, you're good. And I'm not really sure he thought that was a solution, but it opened up our eyes to doing a boardwalk structure. And then I had another one of these ideas that I thought was great, but it was also risky. And that was, we were specifying epi wood, IPE, from Brazil. And it was coming from the rainforest. And I thought, well, we're going to build a boardwalk. What if we looked if we could source wood from California or North America? And we found black locust wood, which was great. It was easy to obtain, or so we thought. And at the time, it was. We did our research, but we didn't count on a 2-year delay with our project. And so as we got the project underway, we started constructing it, and we were dealing with the neighbors because this wood was coming only in small batches. And so we were having a project that looked like a contractor was absent and the city wasn't interested. And so my tip on being creative is make sure your creativity works today and it works tomorrow. And in the last stage, this is the refinement stage, and I think this is where a lot of people think creativity occurs. And it doesn't until you've done your data gathering, your development, and then you're into refinement. And so on this, we said, okay, we're going to build a boardwalk. Let's see where the best boardwalks are. We found one in Yosemite. We thought finishes were going to be really important. That picture to the far right is actual boardwalk installed. We had a kitchen cabinet maker making this boardwalk. So the details are very, very nice. And we found hardware so we didn't have to have any exposed connections on the boardwalk. And then because the regulatory agencies were so passionate, as we were, about the sycamores and the steelhead, our interpretive signs speak of that. So when someone sees there's a boardwalk, it's an unusual trail, they make the connection. And then, so the trail developed, it's open to the public. We can walk past sycamore trees, we can walk over them, works out really well. We hug the road in certain areas, and then in other areas, we use guardrail just because of the curvature of the road. But in both of these cases, stormwater flow comes off the road as it always did, so there was no need for curb and gutter and drainage as there had been in the original master plan. We graded the boardwalk so there was no more than a 2-foot drop, so there was no need for railing and that sense of constraint that would have created, and then it meanders to the woods as we had hoped for. We did have some compromises. Our trail is 6 feet wide at the boardwalk. It widens out in the paved areas, but the boardwalk is 6 feet. But going back to the master plan, that was all we were going to be able to develop here, and that was going to be on a curb. So cycling would have really never occurred here. I know cycling occurs here, and I don't want to say you can't, but for legal reasons, we put a walking man here just to remind people you should be riding on the road. And then at the gateway, we didn't need a boardwalk here, but we needed design continuity, so we added the material into this large circle that you enter the space, you get orientated. We used the sycamore leaves to mimic what we were celebrating in the area. And then a sycamore tree is nearby, and we placed the gateway so people could observe it and see what we were doing. So to wrap up, you want to gather your ideas. At that point, this is a pro tip, you want to stop gathering ideas because your engineers, your architects, your fellow designers are going to be fed up with you if you say, those plans looked really good at 95%, but I've got a new idea. So stop on that gathering. When you're developing your ideas, work them through. Make sure they're possible, but also think about them in time. In my case, the use of the wood became a real challenge, and we were lucky to get the project done in the season we had to do it. And then finally, you want to refine your idea, which means we went back and started thinking about the client. It was the regulatory agencies, it was us carrying the Bay Area Ridge Trail brands, we had to have quality. We really worked the details so people would be proud of this project. And so the before and after here shows you California in its two seasons, wet and dry. And we're at the same location, but you can see how we're able to provide public access to the area. And I thank you all very much for your attention.